Hello, and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown podcast with me, Jack Alderton, and my mate, Callum Goodall, in a week where we drew 1-1 with Spurs in the battle of two of the worst sides to grace the top five. I'm not even sure grace is the right word, to the top five European leagues this season. It's 8 games without a win now. We're recording on the 5th of May. It feels like a lifetime since we last won a game in February. And I suppose a good place to start would just be by saying that's quite frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, incredibly frustrating. I've not seen us win a game since I broke my hand, and I've needed it. And they're not delivering. So if they need any extra motivation, and if any of you are listening to this, do it for me. But yeah, no, it has been incredibly frustrating. And I think this game, perhaps even more so, just because it felt like in parts we were in control, I would say, for the majority of the game. I think we were the better side, and it's probably the closest we've come to a win, and then one mistake undoes it all anyway, so then you leave feeling exactly the same. It's deflation, it's frustration, but yeah, even more so because of what could have been.
Yeah, it's a different feeling though, isn't it? I mean, coming away from a game where you feel like you should have gotten more, you should have taken more than a game where you feel like your own ability to implode at all of the wrong moments is, the result is just punishment for that. I don't think it's a much more positive feeling in truth as a fan. I think it's there's a stage at which, and I think we reached this after the Brighton match, and Potter said as much himself, you can talk about good performances and positives to take away as much as you like, but there is a stage at which you do just need to start winning games and finding a way to win games. But there were, and we will go into that on this, but there were some new things we learned, and I think some good things to take away from this, even if we were playing a heavily rotated Spurs side. I must say, throughout this entire podcast, I'm not going to make very much of that, because you can only play the team that's in front of you, and I don't think there's much point in going into sort of hypotheticals about what might have happened had so-and-so been on the pitch, or how it might have been different if other players had played. You can only deal with what's put in front of you, as I've said. But Cal, before we do that, because I think all things West Ham right now are pretty trying and pretty difficult, did you enjoy the rest of your weekend?
Yeah, I did actually. I did. All in all, the rest of the weekend was good, and the day before the game was also a positive one. So yeah, managed to make the most of the weekend in spite of the performance.
Good. I'm glad.
You?
Mine wasn't entirely ruined by the game, but I did have to do all the work very quickly so that we could record this today. So I wasn't up until 2:30 in the morning watching Spurs over again. But my client will speak no further on that matter. Let's dig into some of the main takeaways from the game, though. And to be honest, I think the best place to start is to talk about what was very clearly an altered game plan, an altered approach against Spurs. Back to a 3-4-3, Souček and Paquetá in the middle, Füllkrug up front, Cresswell back into the side, a left centre back. I think those were really good changes on paper, because I think there were some positives to take away from the Brighton match, in the fact that Souček and Paquetá sort of did an okay job in there together, certainly worked hard in the middle, and combined to bring at least some of the attributes that we need in midfield. We know, as we've spoken about on this pod throughout the entire season, that there really isn't a way to sort of square the circle of the fact that attributes in midfield are key attributes in midfield are lacking: pace, ability to carry the ball up the pitch, ability to progress and control, without that coming at the cost of inability to defend adequately. We know we have all of these issues in midfield, but I think they did an okay enough job of helping us to at least attack in the Brighton match, and it was worth seeing that again and seeing if there was more to that, more to take away from that. We spent almost all of last week talking about the balance between control and threat, and how that changed in the second half versus the first half. And actually, I think the most important thing to begin talking about with Spurs is that, at least out of possession, I think this is the first time that I felt in what feels like quite a long time, we've had really good control without the ball.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it came with a higher line. It came with a more aggressive approach of, I guess, man-to-man largely across the pitch, certainly sort of with the front three and the midfield two and the wing-backs. And it was really pleasing to see. I think we both remarked while we were in the ground, sort of watching the difference with Cresswell on the pitch versus without. I think in previous weeks we've seen Potter screaming from the sideline of the back line needs to get up, the back line needs to be on the halfway line, but whether it's a lack of confidence, whether it's a lack of understanding, or some combination of the two, not all three centre-backs have never really seemed to carry that out. They're a bit too nervous maybe, and they drop those 5 or so yards deeper than Potter would like, and as a result you can quite easily be put under the cosh or caught out. And having Cresswell in there screaming, and when I say screaming I mean screaming with arms in the air, and just making sure that both Todibo and Kilman were dragging themselves up alongside Cresswell, and sort of such a minor thing, like as generally we're talking like maybe 6 to 8 yards difference, but even just that tweak and sort of the team doing it all together, which I think is something that Bowen, was it Bowen? I can't remember who it was. Someone made a comment after the match about how it was the first time, I think it was Wan-Bissaka actually, how the first time the team had all pressed together as a unit, and how much easier that makes the game, rather than sort of some individuals pressing and others not, and then the sort of chain reaction that allows it all to fall down. So yeah, I think that level of organisation combined with the sort of front-footedness and sort of aggression was really actually quite pleasing to see, especially when you consider what an important role Aaron Cresswell played in it, given sort of the idea of the oldest player on the pitch being the one that actually made it all change.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't expect to bring in one of your older players and be able to execute a higher line, a more intense pressing approach, and get away with it. But it's that organisation element, isn't it? That's so central. It's that confidence and that ability to drag others with you. I think this is I agree. The first time we've really seen the team press all as one properly as a unit in a while. I think back to maybe games like when Potter first came in against Fulham, we were really good and we were able to win some high turnovers and create chances like that. We haven't seen anywhere near enough of that in the following months, and we got back to a little bit of that in this game. We won lots of turnovers in the middle third. We won a good number of turnovers in the final third. There's another conversation to come after this, which is about, did we convert at all on that, or did we manage to really create many chances from that? That's a separate discussion. But at least out of possession, stopping Spurs building up, stopping Spurs generating anything dangerous, and actually winning the ball in good areas ourselves. I think that all functioned really nicely. Timing was really good. I was actually very impressed with the intensity given by Bowen and Kudus at the top of the pitch. We, instead of using a striker to sort of chase everything down and run around the pitch willy-nilly, it made it quite simple actually for Niclas Füllkrug, which I thought was good. We sat him on Yves Bissouma. He didn't then have to do a huge amount of running, which obviously one of the issues we've had this season is strikers haven't necessarily had the most amount in their legs unless we've played Bowen there, which causes other problems. So sitting the striker on the 6 and saying you don't have to run around anywhere near as much as pretty much everyone else in the team. You just stay there and man mark that player out of the game. Everyone else will cover the ground for you. And I thought Bowen and Kudus did that really well. It's a hard job to come up from wing and to push through, press through those centre backs right through onto the goalkeeper at times, and really maintain the level of intensity. I'm really impressed as well with Emerson and Wan-Bissaka, the way they got up and supported that. Emerson, a really quiet performance in truth, but what was it? Once they broke through on his side of the pitch, because his timing was always perfect. It was so difficult for, Archie Gray on that side. Really difficult for Gray to ever find an opportunity to pass forwards, because the timing was just always spot on. And that comes from behind. Those wing backs can't release themselves to go quite so aggressively if they haven't got Cresswell behind them, and Todibo, to be fair, as well, and definitely lifted by Cresswell. Pushing forwards themselves and screaming at the player in front of them, go, leave me, it's fine. And, I've got this. Going 3v3 at the back feels a little bit scary, but really, if you spend 80 million quid on your back line on players that can cover wide areas and should be able to cover in behind for you, that is what you should be able to do. That is the reason you spend that amount of money. It's to help you be able to step up the pitch like that and be a more aggressive team without the ball. And that was very, very good to see. We have to say, though, massive difference. We've already talked about how effective the left side was. Massive difference between the left side and the right side. And to see Cresswell in his mid-30s cope so well, run so quick across ground, press so well, win turnovers and cover space so brilliantly. The only time Emerson was beaten really in the first half. There was one other collective failure that happened on that side of the pitch, but individually the only time that he was beaten, Cresswell did brilliantly to cover across, make a big slide tackle and put it out for a throw in.
The whole crowd cheering as well, didn't
With
they?
the whole crowd cheering, exactly. But the right-hand side with Jean-Clair Todibo, I have to ask you, are you getting concerned?
Yes. Yes. I know that Potter himself has even talked about sort of the need for a full summer and all of that, but I think we've discussed this together before about... I hear that, but also you've kind of had the whole season as well, and I'd maybe expect you to be moving slightly faster than you have been, and I think it becomes even more of a concern when you sort of look at how we presumably want to play going forward. I imagine this sort of approach will be plan A rather than plan B for most games under Potter, once he's sort of got the full sort of squad that he's after and sort of not just bits and bobs here and there. But we've committed to Todibo regardless. So even when you've got that full squad of players, it's likely that given how much of an outlay we've put on for him, that he's going to be that starting right-sided centre-back. And as much as I think we did a great job of limiting Spurs, I think every time that ball was played through into that sort of channel behind the right back, behind the right wing-back and alongside the right centre-back, Todibo had, I think there was one occasion where he had like a 3 or 4 yard head start and got burnt still and only just managed to poke it out with his toe. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. It's a little bit scary if that becomes a real sort of focus for other teams. And like you say, after the summer, maybe he will sort of have his fitness back on and he won't be so sluggish, and that will be a real benefit for us. But if this is Todibo, if this is what he is and what we get, then I think it does become a lot more of an issue than maybe we are considering it to be at the minute. You even saw it throughout the game, right? The sort of way that Tottenham looked to attack grew more and more down that side, in part because they were having no luck down the opposite side because of how well Emerson, Cresswell and to some extent Kilman covering as well if they did get past Cresswell. But also I think there was an element of, we've got the burners on Todibo here. Like if we play that ball in a foot race, I'd back us at least to get through a couple of times. And yeah, I think frankly we were probably fortunate that he didn't get exposed any more than he actually did. But it is concerning, and I know that you've got some other concerns with regards to what he offers in possession as well, which is a bit of a shame because I think that's what we all thought was going to be the real big bonus of bringing him in, right?
Yeah, well, the pressure resistance is undoubtedly there. I think the issue is that there just hasn't been enough progressive impact. I want to see him carry more with the ball. I want to see him break lines more regularly with the ball. We haven't, in truth, we haven't seen enough of that this season. It's reflected in the data where he crops up as one of the weaker progressive centre backs in the Premier League, which, you know, it doesn't fairly reflect the calming presence that he does bring in possession. We do a lot of good work through Wan-Bissaka on that side, in part because Todibo helps make that happen. But I still think he's capable of a little bit more individually on that side of the pitch. My worry in many ways is partly because I know he can do it. So, you know, you start first 20 minutes of the game, intensity is really good. We won so many turnovers through him and Wan-Bissaka on that side of the pitch. Actually, his willingness to go so high, you know, when we're attacking the situations where he's pressing by the corner flag, you know, he stepped all the way up the pitch. He's really committed to doing it, and he did it really well. It's just, as the game went on, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until he eventually came off. I mean, there was a little resurgence after half time. You give him 15-minute break, he come out and did a good 10 minutes again. But I just can't quite understand how at this stage of the season his fitness can be quite so bad. You've got to be in physical shape to be able to go at Premier League intensity with consistency, for me, by this point, for a full 90, but at least give me an hour of that consistent level of intensity. I don't want varying. I don't want, you know, here's a good 20 minutes, but then I'm going to give you 15, 20 minutes where it's all a bit hairy and it doesn't necessarily go well. And I think, you know, we've spoken about consistency this season. Potter's spoken about consistency this season. Lopetegui spoke about consistency this season before he left. It's so important that when you play that way, that you can trust your players to go, yeah, it's not always going to go right. He's not going to get it right 10 times out of 10, but he's going to play physically. He's going to be able to cover that ground the same way each time. The decisions might not always be exactly right. And sometimes players are going to do, have a moment of brilliance and be able to get past him. And that's obviously the case. But you don't want to find these moments where the ball goes over the top and it's like, whoa, hang on. 5 minutes ago, he could sprint across that space, and now he can't. He just cannot cover that amount of ground in the time needed. I think that's a big concern. There's a lot of doubt for me going into next season about how much a pre-season can resolve all of those issues that we're seeing. If he was injured all the time, sure. He's not anymore. He's playing regular football, and he's still not getting the regular football training every week. I expect the fitness to be there, the physical ability to do it, like we say, consistently, to be there by now. So, well, I'm going to park that there because I think we could go on about that for a while.
Sadly.
And hopefully there's some kind of solution coming in the summer. There are a couple of other things I wanted to speak about, and I mentioned control versus threat and how crystallized that was in the Brighton game. And if Todibo, a little bit of concern defensively in possession now, Cresswell, just an unbelievable performance in resolving all of those issues individually.
Oh, I mean, it was like watching Cresswell of old. You were getting particularly animated, actually. Suddenly you were like, he's just so good. And I was like, to be fair, he's having a good game. But yeah, just the sort of, the composure, like, I don't know if I would necessarily have ever described Aaron Cresswell as press resistant, but it just like, his decision making, I think, is probably a better way of describing it. It's not like he's not going to like roll the man, dribble into the middle of the pitch, but 9 times out of 10, whether it is clip the ball down the line, whether it is play the ball into the feet of the midfielder ahead of him, whether it is knock it back inside to the centre back, he makes that decision right, and that is almost as good as press resistance, because you're not taking those risks that actually, yeah, you might be press resistant by nature, but actually that comes with a level of sort of obvious risk. Mavropanos being the prime example, right? It's like, okay, you're press resistant to a fault because you're actually now trying things when actually the better option would have just to have sniffed out the danger and gone, nah, not today, not this moment, next time I'll do press resistance, but right now it needs to go. And I think that, yeah, Cresswell sort of just adding that air of composure, but in a way that maybe is less orthodox in sort of the modern age of football, where everyone sees sort of composure as being able to dribble past a striker and then roulette it through midfield and then carry into the final third.
If he's not press resistant, he's press destructive for me.
Yeah, there we go.
He makes
Just
it really
pump
hard.
it over the top.
He makes it really hard, and it's mainly because his decision making is so consistent. He will do the right thing almost every time. Like you say, whether that's a ball over the top, whether that's a ball into midfield, or whether that's a ball
Big
up the line to the winger, or a big switch, or whatever it is, or a ball back to the goalkeeper. He knows, he's able to read the right time for each of those things most of the time, and that helps so much. I think in terms of what we get from Ward-Prowse, where he's kind of been forced to come in and play a big role since coming back from loan, because he's kind of the only midfielder who's able to sort of bounce the ball back to the centre-backs, relieve a little bit of pressure, allow us to play without us losing the ball all the time. This is kind of the first time I've seen us without Ward-Prowse, at least in a while, and it takes Cresswell performing at a really high level, to be honest. Maintain periods of possession, beat pressure, play through, and sustain attacks. Without needing that extra body in the midfield, which is massive. And I think the bigger question really to land on for this top section, and give me a brief answer if you can, because I think this is a whole podcast in itself, and we'll do this in the summer. But do you think that's instructive when it comes to looking, into the future, into the transfer window? We've thought a lot about, what qualities we need in midfield, but perhaps having a centre back who is reliable in terms of their decision making in and out of possession and can play, and break pressure in the way that Cresswell can, might really resolve a lot of the not the need to invest in midfield, but the pressure on those players to immediately solve all of the problems by coming in and performing at an 8 out of 10 level every single week?
I think it would make a lot of sense. I think it would probably be something that Potter and Macaulay are already thinking about anyway. I would imagine if you think about how he's likely to want to line up, we're probably going to want another centre-back to come in anyway. He's not been that convinced by Mavropanos. He's not going to be able to rely on Cresswell, whether he gets a contract extension or not. Who knows how that goes? And I think also just in terms of how much work needs to be done, how much money there is or isn't to be spent, depending on where you read your news, a defender generally comes cheaper than a midfielder anyway. So if you can find someone that brings those qualities, and as we've said, it already made the system function a hell of a lot better by having a 35-year-old Aaron Cresswell in there. So it makes sense that you'd look at that and go, hang on a sec, all it took was one player at the back to sort of make everyone else look better. Why would you not then start thinking about players that could come in and do that? I don't think it needs to be a 19-year-old centre-back that's got super high resale value. I think you just need someone who can come in and sort of make everyone 5 to 10% better, sort of allows you to play Kilman and Todibo in ways that they want to be played. It takes probably some onus off of Kilman to be so aggressive out of possession if you get someone that can come in and do that, and then allows Kilman to be the covering centre-back that we saw with Cresswell and Todibo either side. And also I think we've been talking about it a lot on the podcast for weeks, right? There's been a dearth of leadership at the back anyway, in terms of someone who is sort of that mouthpiece for Potter on the pitch. Bowen is the captain, but he's always quite far away from anything that's actually going on anyway, particularly in build-up. So someone who can sort of marshal that back line when clearly Kilman doesn't seem to be that guy. I don't think Todibo wants to be that guy either. The goalkeeper situation is its own thing. So yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense. And like I've just said, I don't think you need to go and spend crazy amounts of money. I think there are players that can do this.
It's like you're looking for Todibo's Dante or Kilman's Dawson. You're looking
go
for
and
someone
get Harry
who's
Maguire. See if
it.
we can get him out of United.
Been there, done it, has experience at the top level and understands the basics. Might not be have the highest potential or the ability to play at the same level as Kilman or Todibo theoretically could, but can help those guys reach a higher level themselves and therefore help with a knock-on effect everyone in front perform at a better level, both in and out of possession. If out of possession was much improved, we saw a man-to-man press that we really liked, and we took a lot of positives from that. Talk to me about the attack, because 3-4-3 with Bowen, Kudus and Füllkrug on the front line, I have to say it feels like we should be able to get a whole lot more than we do. It still feels really slow. It still feels really tough to generate chances regularly or repeatedly. It feels really tough to generate big chances. I think we generated enough in the game really to win it, and Vicario makes a brilliant save, and I think we fluffed, I don't know what, 5-6 excellent openings or crossing opportunities and made the wrong decision and stuff, but I think we should be capable of a lot more than we show in this game, and than we have shown across the last couple of months. Yeah,
I think so. I think it's one of those, isn't it, where the squad, I hate it because we always keep saying about it, but the blend of profiles that we've got at the minute, because we've chopped and changed managers and haven't actually done the surgery to the playing squad at the same time, means that we've sort of been chopping and changing between systems that either get the best out of the defence or best out of possession at the sort of to detract from the in-possession stuff, or you do something that's quite nice in possession, that's more counter-attacking and gets the best out of our attacking players, but then leaves the defence in a bit of a spot as well because it's not bringing out their strengths. So it felt like this was one of the days where the sort of out-of-possession approach was beneficial, but then it didn't allow Bowen and Kudus to maybe have those direct moments in behind. It was a lot sort of more operating in tighter spaces, lots more link up with Niclas Füllkrug, which I think in moments looked great, but I think you could just tell that because it's not something we've been doing week in, week out, there were moments where, I don't know, Bowen maybe didn't make the run as quick as you might expect him to do once Füllkrug's played the pass in behind, or Paquetá's maybe looking for different runs than he has been in previous games because they're been making them from different areas of the pitch. So there was just things where it was like, oh, if that final little move had just clicked, I think this would have been really good. And you see it for the goal, right? I think the goal is the perfect example of what this system should look like in possession and in terms of creating chances. It goes down one side, it goes back through the centre backs, it comes out to the other side, and then we hit a switch, and all of a sudden we've created a chance in sort of the perfect way. But it was the only time we saw it, which is the shame, right? Which I guess you could flip it and be like, that is a positive. There are shoots of positivity growing through. You can see that the team is starting to get it slowly. But it doesn't make for a particularly exciting spectacle when you're there for 90 minutes and you're coming away going, God, I'm really glad we created one good chance today.
I think it's tough, isn't it? I mean, I think as much as Wan-Bissaka does absolutely magnificently to assist the goal, there are lots of situations where he gets into really good crossing positions and he can't quite produce the right ball. Lots of times he's actually trying to play the exact correct pass, but he just gets it slightly wrong, or it gets blocked. And then Spence made a brilliant block, Ben Davies made a brilliant block. Both of those could quite easily have produced goals if those blocks aren't made, but it's just about the quality on the ball, the timing that you hit it with. Can you just make that slightly sharper, slightly better? Emerson on the other side, I mean, there's one moment from him where he drove into the box brilliantly and then his cross clears the box on the other side. And it's like, I think if you're going to, and this is such a long running conversation for this podcast, but if you're going to play a back three system, you do need to have one player in those wing back slots who at least, I would say maybe it kind of has to be their bit that they're very good going forward. And I think the two that we have can produce in moments. I think where they're both at their best is in the middle third. They've both shown their ability across recent seasons to, Wan-Bissaka more this season, Emerson more last season, their ability to break pressure and create
the combination
more promising attacking situations from settled middle third possession. But then when you arrive now in the final third off the back of the work they've done to help you get there maybe isn't quite enough from them collectively between the two of them, which is to say, Wan-Bissaka can have a great game or Emerson might have a great game, but it's very rare that we see them both produce in attack at the same time. And I think that's largely because it's not really their number one skill. It's not really the thing that they do best. There are other things that they're good at, and then occasionally they can produce at a high level as attacking players. And I think that makes it tough because it puts much more pressure on just that front three, and that front three producing at a really high level consistently. And I think you mentioned it, in tight spaces you need those players, Kudus and Bowen, to be able to. You just need someone in that slot who can dominate, who can create really reliably at a high level, and create promising situations over and over and over and over and over again, make it really tough for the defence. And I had a little bit of time today. I had about 10-15 minutes to rattle through looking for some other examples of teams playing 3-4-3 across Europe's top 5 leagues, just to kind of compare and contrast, like, what are our guys doing that the other teams aren't doing, or what are other teams doing that we're not doing. And I think the thing that immediately became clear to me is that across most of the other examples where teams are playing 3-4-3, either in the Premier League or at higher levels in leagues around Europe, they do have someone who takes on lots of passes and does create at a high level reliably in pretty much every single game. So whether that's, and I'm going to go through quite a lot of names now, but whether that's Man United and Bruno Fernandes, Crystal Palace and Ebere Eze, Bayer Leverkusen and Florian Wirtz, Atalanta and Ademola Lookman or Charlotte de Catalara, Wolves and Cunha, Nice and Jeremy Boga or Sofiane Diop, Mainz and Lee, Celta Vigo and Iago Aspas. Yes, he gets a mention on the pod. I never thought I'd see the day.
Cresswell and Aspas getting mentioned on this pod. Come on, 2025.
This might be one of the best of the season. Or Strasbourg and Bakwa, who is the last one on my list.
Great player.
All of those players, every single one of those players that I've just mentioned, has played more passes per 90 than Bowen or Kudus. Some of them have played more than Bowen and Kudus combined. So players like Bruno Fernandes or Wirtz are doing more than those two combined, which is not necessarily massively surprising. But then in the Man United example, there are only a couple of places above us in the Premier League. Crucially as well, every single one of those players, bar two, it's only Lee at Mainz and Diop at Nice, are producing more than 0.2 expected assisted goals per game, and many of them are up at 0.25 or 0.27 or 0.28. really reliable, top quality creators in their front lines. Now, Bowen has done really well creatively this season. He's up on 0.21 expected assisted goals, but just 24 passes indicates how rarely he is involved. And you see that again in this game. Two really brilliant chances, create some good moments, but you have 10-15 minute periods in the match where you don't see all that much of Bowen. You don't see him getting on the ball all that often. You actually see Kudus getting on the ball a lot more in our front line. He plays 5 more passes on average per game, still only 29. That's, again, lower than every other player we've just mentioned at all of these other teams. But he's only produced 0.09 expected assisted goals this season per 90, which is less than half even the worst player in any other 3-4-3 example across Europe, which is not to say that either of these players are bad. It's to say that in these roles, I think they bring important qualities, but they both don't quite bring the most important quality for a 3-4-3 to function at its best level, which is that incredible creative ability, that ability to dismark between the lines, arrive in dangerous positions, pull a centre-back out, and then as soon as that centre-back comes out, the rest of the defensive structure falls apart. And can you convert? Can you dribble past? Can you create a moment of real promise? And if Bowen's been closer, the biggest issue is he obviously can't assist himself because he's the main guy that scores too, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the main takeaway from me is that I think there's probably space for one of them in the 3-4-3 as one of the 10s or sort of wide forwards, I guess, depending on which approach we're playing. But if you're thinking of that box and the ability to operate in tight spaces, I think it's fine to have one of the two. I think whether that's Kudus to dribble at the defence that's been sort of broken apart and sort of attack the frailty in that defence, or whether it's Bowen to sort of get on the end of the chance that's been created by the other 10. But I think with both of them in the same team, I just don't think it's a complementary enough relationship in this system. I think when we've played previously and it's been slightly more direct, there's definitely space for both of them because I think their strengths complement one another. But I think in this team where they need to be slightly closer and more combinative, and you need to sort of have those players that are happy to sort of, I guess you just need to be a bit more dynamic and a bit more fluid. You need to be able to play the ball in behind and make the run in behind and take your man if you can. Or if you can't, you need to be amazing at one and then the other person needs to be amazing at the other thing. And at the minute, I think we've got two players that are kind of too similar to one another, really. Like they're kind of shot first guys. It's fine to accommodate one, but you need the other one to create the shots for that bloke. And unfortunately, Bowen is the better of the two in that moment, or at least on form. So yeah, bringing in someone that can be a bit more of a facilitator for him, I think would be key. And I had a bit of a look as well just before we started in terms of who. Basically, I just thought, I wonder what Pascal Gross's numbers were at Brighton when Potter was there, and he never failed to put up less than. Oh my gosh, my words! I'm getting too excited about Gross. He always put up more than 0.2 expected assisted goals in the seasons under Potter, which kind of just hammers home that benchmark that you've identified looking across those 3-4-3s. So yeah, I think perhaps depending again on what happens in this summer that's becoming almost mythic in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done. But sort of addressing that, I guess, is key. And maybe some people will be listening going, well, what about Paquetá? What about Paquetá? The fact is we, again, because of squad makeup, need him so much deeper. And I think he's probably better in that sort of slightly more 8-10 role than a 10 winger role.
I'll be honest, I prefer him in the 10 winger role, but I think his creative output isn't consistent enough to do that for us. I think he is really good, much like Emerson at his best or a Wan-Bissaka at his best, as a convert your stable possession into now something to speed. It's sped up and we're creating a more promising attacking situation. The pass before the pass is very much his game. And at the moment, I think we've got 3 players that are playing supporting roles for the front line that are very good at the pass before the pass, but no one really in that front line who can consistently play the defence splitting pass, the defence breaking cross, the moment that creates a goal. That's what's missing. And that's magic. That stuff is magic. It's hard to find. And maybe the only thing I would say before you give us the names, Crescencio Somerville will be sitting there thinking, if I can get myself back fit over the summer, that's kind of what I was bought for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a shame that we haven't seen him this season because we literally saw in Potter's first game instantly how impactful Crescencio Somerville was in the system that Potter wants to play. And then it just all unfortunately unravelled. And his absence will surely be a big part in that. But it also should be cause for excitement, because if he does get back fit, when he gets back fit, let's be positive, it will be really exciting. And it's so cliche to say, isn't it? But it genuinely will feel like a new signing, not least because the first time we really saw him was under Lopetegui, and that wasn't really cooking anyway. It didn't really work in that system. So it genuinely will be like a new signing, because he's coming into a brand new system that in large part looks almost purpose-built for him in terms of the strengths that we saw him exhibit when he was at Leeds, cooking up all those crazy numbers.
So at the end of each pod, I usually try and guide us towards some of the sort of big takeaways, things that we can say after each week that we've learned about the team. And we are, as much as the season has been incredibly dreary to watch, we have, I think, learned a lot about the group. And I think even if there are, lots of negatives to take out of this season, I think it's at least helps us to understand what work needs to be done to help us be successful going forward. I think the biggest positive thing to take away from this weekend is that for all of our attempts to try and produce a high intensity pressing performance across this season, we have largely failed to do so. And even when we have managed to win a game playing a more intense pressing approach, we have generally conceded about 900 chances in those matches, right? We've been forced our keeper to make loads of saves, forced a defender to make incredible blocks or clearances. This is probably one of the first times this season that I've seen us step up man to man and put in a performance where we didn't get cut through time and time and time again. In fact, it was very difficult for Spurs to generate chances, which to me says, and I know Spurs are not a very good team this season, but it does say to me that there is enough in the group to be able to produce a high intensity pressing performance with success, which is a good baseline to build on. And frankly, for me, there have been many times this season where I've said, right, that's the kind of level of performance that I need to see every single week. But they've maybe been in different contexts. Either we've seen a better performance with the ball, calmness with the ball, something like the Leicester game at home, the last time we won. We showed calmness with the ball. We showed a confidence in, we've got enough quality here to win this match without really creating too many moments for you to counterattack us and open the game up into any kind of basketball match we're just going to trust, and we know we're going to win when we do that. And that was really nice. We've also seen performances like Arsenal away, where we've packed in, been defensive, been aggressive in our own third, cleared the box really well, worked hard together as a unit, and screwed out a result by performing at the defensive basics in our own half at a high level, and working for each other. If someone gets beaten, someone's there immediately to make a tackle. Someone's there immediately to make a block. If the defense gets beaten in a moment or someone releases a great shot from range, the keeper will pull off a save. That we saw that in the game against Arsenal. And of course, I'm probably forgetting games before under Lopetegui. I think generally my impression of the Lopetegui era is when we won, we were very fortunate maybe not to have conceded more. And there were games maybe where we lost, where we were quite lucky not to have scored a few more. Yeah. And
the Leicester and the Newcastle games, probably the perfect yin-yang to that. We go away to Newcastle, go fairly intense and win 2-0, but because Fabianski's man of the match, we conceded 16 shots in our own box and just scored the chances we had. And then Leicester, we absolutely battered them, but they kind of did us against us. They sort of sat off, and the two chances they had, they scored. So
because someone thought it was a great idea to leave Mavropanos on the halfway line with Vardy 15 yards behind anyone else on the pitch, because that's really, really, really clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
My point is that I think on balance, this is the closest thing to an out of possession, high intensity performance in the opposition's half that worked without us conceding loads of chances and relying on a big performance from a goalkeeper or a defender. We actually finally worked as a team defensively to limit the opposition while stepping up the pitch. And that, and I'm sorry, because it feels like a high baseline for us this season, that has to be the baseline for next season. I do not care who comes into the group, what challenges we're going through, who's injured, what have you. You have to be able to produce that level of intensity week in, week out in the Premier League to compete. And if that's hard, that's the Premier League.
I mean, I don't know what else I can add to that, really. Everyone knows how I feel about sort of the fact that I would have loved to have seen us adopt a higher, more intense pressing approach, probably coming on to a year and a half ago now. And I look back now and think, actually, yeah, with the players we had, it probably wasn't the smartest idea, but maybe I am just sort of a ideologist in some ways in the way I like to see my football played. But now that I've seen it, I don't want to ever see anything else ever again. This is it. This is it. But yeah, no, you're right, man. It's nice to take the positivity away from it, because I think, by and large, when we have seen it, we've kind of always then gone back into our shell and been gone, oh, me especially, been like, actually, no, I was wrong to think that these lot could do this. But when you think about it, like, these are still the same players that Lopetegui had, and to some extent Moyes as well, really. Like, we're still doing this. This performance was still done because Cresswell put in a shift, because Souček actually had a pretty good game despite him being asked to do things that maybe he wouldn't like to do ordinarily. Paqueta, Kudus, Bowen, all players that were heavy featured under both managers prior to Potter, and sort of maybe earned a label almost as, oh, they can't do the progressive, or they can't do the aggressive out of possession modern stuff, because look what happens when they try and do it. And I'm pleased that, obviously from a team perspective, we've been able to do it, and I'm pleased that Potter's been able to do it, but I'm also pleased for them sort of being able to show that actually, no, these guys play Premier League football, and amazingly they're actually quite decent. So yeah, this is the baseline, you're right. And I think the most exciting thing is that these lot did it, and we're going to bring in profiles that presumably are even more suited to doing it, rather than just, wow, Cresswell's played a blinder today and I really didn't think he'd ever be able to do that again.
Yeah, I think it's the baseline if you're going to play this way, and it's very likely, I think, the manager will be here next season, so it becomes the baseline for how this team needs to perform. And remember, of course, we are talking without the ball. We're kind of disregarding everything with the ball when we're having this conversation. I think we're talking about baseline, out of possession stuff, I think.
Which I think is a fine place to start, considering how many goals we were conceding under Lopetegui and Moyes at the end of that season. Yeah,
and I think it's fair to say you can see the struggle for some of these players in the second half, in the last 20 minutes. So
Cresswell in them last 10, bro.
Yeah, so people talked a lot about last 20, 25 minutes. It was so flat. We didn't see enough from West Ham. West Ham didn't push enough. We have to think, on the one hand, we've just come off of imploding several times at the end of games. There's going to be a little bit of, let's just be a little bit cautious here and not throw everything at it, because the worst thing would be to again come out of this match having conceded in the 92nd minute to a counter-attack, having been the better side for the vast majority of the game. For me, really, the whole game. That would be a terrible feeling for the group. It would be a terrible feeling to come away for anyone associated with the club. So I think it was wise in many respects to not throw caution to the wind completely in the last 10, 15, 20 even minutes of the match. Simultaneously, on the other hand, you can just see the legs were just gone for a lot of the players, which speaks to two things. In some cases where I expect the legs to be a bit better, where's the fitness been this season? What happened in pre-season? Why are these guys not fit enough? How have some people got through medicals? Why are some of these guys not fit enough to be able to produce this level in the Premier League? How can you target guys like, for example, if you superimpose Guido Rodriguez into that, what was the thinking? He would never have been able to cope. Right?
Oh gosh, so I kind of wish I'd seen it.
How does it even happen? How does that kind of thing even come about? If that's the way that you need to play, and that's the intensity that you need to be able to give. With some of the other players, I think it's maybe more of an indication that, okay, maybe this guy hasn't got 90 minutes in his legs at this age to be able to do that anymore in the Premier League, and that either means we need to bring someone else in to do that, or we need someone who can rotate with them to help them cover those minutes. And I think that's nice. In many ways, it was really nice to see players coming off limping off the pitch, having given absolutely emptied the tank completely. I've got nothing left to give. yeah, I'd rather see you reach that point than get through 90 minutes and have a little bit more when you're coming off. I'd rather see it, like Cresswell, I'm lumping the ball off the pitch and I'm falling onto the deck, and please get me off the pitch. I cannot walk anymore.
Yeah, I think me and Darcy discussed it towards the back end of the preview about sort of how this was probably going to be the best indicator we have now until the end of the season of sort of who wants to stick around next season and fight for Potter, and who's gone, my season's over, we're not going down, and I've got nothing else to play for, and I'm probably going to be sold in the summer, so sod this. And obviously it's the Spurs game, probably the biggest in terms of a derby match bar Chelsea that we have in the Premier League. And I think it was pleasing to see, like you say, Cresswell obviously led by example, but across the pitch, really, I don't think anyone could be sort of criticised for their effort levels. Whether their performance was a 10 out of 10 performance is a different story. But in terms of giving everything, I think everyone on that pitch did. And I think that's really pleasing, because it would be so easy, given how the season's gone and sort of everything that's being discussed, looking ahead to the summer and how Potter doesn't have any players that he wants yet and blah, blah, blah. Like, it'd be so easy to down tools if you take all of that in, especially the stuff about Potter not having players that he wants, because you'd just be like, well, all right then, sod you. Like, if you don't want me, if that's what's being briefed, then I'm not going to work for you. But yeah, it's good. It's good to see, and also probably speaks somewhat to Potter as well in terms of having buy-in from the players in spite of nothing really going right so far.
Yes, actually really good that he's able to extract that at this stage of the season, with the season done, that he's managed to pull that out of the group this week. And it actually says something finally at last positive about them, because there's been a lot of criticism for them in terms of, and fair, there have been so many situations this season where it's just been inconsistent. Players will go and make that burst of press the first 2 times, and then the third time it's like, I just can't be bothered with that again, And we didn't see that at all in this game. Not at all. Players were totally committed, went for it every time. Didn't always work. Sometimes they got beaten. Todibo, bless him, tried every single time. And then in the second half, he started going in behind him, and he was struggling. He didn't stop trying. Mm-hmm. And I think
he's doing what the managers asked him to do as well.
Exactly. That's the important part. Is not, oh, well, I've got beaten this time, so I'm going to stop, and I'm now going to individually divert from the plan, because that's the thing that's going to help make me come out of this looking better as an individual. There's going to be less of a focus on what I can't do. No, the plan is this. I'm struggling with it, but I'm going to keep going. And if I'm really struggling, the manager will bring me off, because I can't do it. And that's where you need to have that team-focused mindset, rather than, I don't quite like this. This makes me a little bit uncomfortable, or I'm really struggling, and now I'm going to do something different that completely disables the rest of the team around me, which is what Füllkrug was speaking about when he went on his rant, that some people get into the squeeze comes on and people think, I'm just going to do what makes me feel more comfortable, rather than sticking to the plan.
I think that was it. I think there was maybe one moment, I would say, which people might come back and be like, well, what about... There's a moment where Paqueta got dispossessed and the recovery was bad. He didn't do anything. And I think we both said, that is not how you respond. And we should flag that, because that was disappointing. But I also think we should flag that there's clearly a lot going on with him at the minute. It was quite sad to see the crying and stuff. So that's just a bit shit. It doesn't excuse it. You're on the pitch and I want you to give everything. But I clearly think there's probably... someone needs to give him a big long hug, I think. Yeah,
it was the clearest indication that all the stuff that's been happening in the background has put a lot of pressure on him and has made things really difficult, and it's easy to forget. Forget that in the week-to-week discussion about football. The last 2 things are really a summary of stuff we've already spoken about, which is, number 1, the 3-4-3, if we are to play that, needs a different profile in the front line. It needs a creator. It needs someone who can take on a lot, a much bigger pass load, and help the team so much more in terms of, like we say, playing that final ball, creating that moment of inspiration in the final third that really brings things to life. We've got players that can score. Füllkrug will score goals if you put someone in the front line that can do that. Bowen will score lots of goals if you put someone in that front line that can get him chances. That's a requirement that happens. Fingers crossed Somerville can be that person. If we go all in on that, which I'm in some respects comfortable with, because I don't think there's a huge amount really in the market at the highest level that's achievable with the amount of money that we're going to have, given the amount of pressure on other positions, then I think wing back becomes more important. Then you have to find at least one profile in the squad who is just an out-and-out attacking wing back. that can help you create chances from crosses or in a different kind of way. It has to be something that we resolve in the summer. And finally, the big pause point that we're going to end on, and it's not really a surprise coming from me, because I do love him. I've loved him for a long time. I've always thought that he's very underrated, far too good on the ball, never spoken about enough. Aaron Cresswell deserves to be here next year.
Agree. As we said, I think we've got a lot of work to do this summer. We've spoken throughout the season about how the squad lacks leaders, unfortunately. I think players that we thought might come in and take more of a leadership role haven't. We've obviously lost Noble and Rice over the last few years, and Cresswell's here, he gets it. And I think what you would have to replace, on top of all the other things that we've got to find this summer if you let him go, I think he's more than serviceable as a backup, and he's a great leader. And if it's true that we are committed to bringing young players through, using the academy more, integrating them into the first team, I've seen what he's done to Ollie Scholes this season in terms of being a guiding hand when he's played alongside him, but also when Scholes comes off, you see them nattering on the bench and stuff, appraising Scholes' performance. Like, that sort of thing goes unseen, but just having that sort of person around who's been around the club for a decade now, maybe more, yeah, he just gets it. He's also got a great relationship with Noble, who's obviously going to be playing an even bigger role in terms of managing that transition and having sort of Cresswell as his man in the playing squad to sort of handle that transition and get sort of full wraparound buy-in from manager to Noble to Cresswell to youth player. I think that just all makes it so much more seamless. Scholes is obviously the first one to come through, but we're looking at Casey, we're looking at Orford, other players as well. So yeah, I just think with all the work we've got to do, why would you let someone who has just proven that he can still do a job? I'm not saying we're going to rely on him. I don't want him to play any more than really 10 or 15 games if we can avoid it, particularly given that there's no Europe or anything, but just to have him around. And also just to sort of be that vocal. You saw him in the game. Just the reason that the defence looked so good is because he was barking Potter's orders at them, and then the defence actually decided to listen and do it, rather than, as you say, sort of go into autopilot and do what they think is the right thing for themselves. Having someone that understands it and can translate it from a player's point of view, rather than manager to player, but from player to player, put it in simple terms. This is what you need to do. You need to be here. Here's why. All of that is crazy important. And he's going to be training week in, week out with the team, whether he plays or not. And that in itself is worth its weight in gold, I think. So yeah, I would definitely get him on for another year at least.
For a second, forget the shouting at those around him, forget the ability he can show on the ball, forget the confidence he showed in the duels, forget the fact that when it came to an aerial that looked really difficult that he was going to get hurt in, that he went up and contested for it and came down with a hard landing but made sure that he won it. Yeah. The thing I loved most was that every time someone did something good, every time someone did something well, there was a thumbs up, there was a little clap, there was a little pat on the back. There was a reinforcement of every positive action as much as there was a criticism for every negative action.
And that's
leadership.
In a squad bereft of confidence.
How many times have we seen that this season? Players actually supporting each other and praising each other for things that they're doing well. That needs to be such a huge part of it as well. That builds a team. And we haven't been a team this season. We need to be a team next season. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Cal, for recording tonight. I know you've got quite a lot on, and you've got cast replacement for your
back to the hospital tomorrow morning. Hopefully the last of the casts, but we'll find out how it's healing. But yeah, should be all good. I've also now just got this image of, if Potter sticks around for a while, Cresswell stinks of being like a coach, doesn't he? You know how Potter just often, or Brighton at least, they bring in like one member of the sort of playing staff.
Bruno Saltor.
Yeah, exactly. This is it. Cresswell is that guy.
I can see it. I can definitely see it. And yeah, look forward to seeing you next week, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about a maintenance of some of the positives that we saw here. I really hope so, because I'd love to do a positive podcast with you. Last week we did a big show on how the out of possession stuff was really good, and this week we're doing a show about how we actually showed that and attacked a little bit better as well.
Yeah. Show me some chance creation, baby.
That would be great. All right, cool. We'll see you then.
Thanks, guys.